Hello and welcome back to the channel. In the previous lecture, we have created our Azure Data Factory and copied the data from the Azure Storage account to the Data Lake account using the copy activity in Azure Data Factory. We have also created a pipeline to copy the data from one resource to the another. So let's move forward and learn about data orchestration as well as the control flow. So here we will understand what is data orchestration and we will have an introduction to control flow activities. So we will implement some conditional and the loop activities in ADF as well as managing the dependency and also how to schedule a job in data factory pipeline. And also let's see about error handling and retry policies in Azure Data Factory. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so we will have some real world scenarios. So last lecture, what we have done is we have just copied the data from the storage account to our data lake gen 2 account. But that is not going to happen in real life. You will be having a file which will come at a specific interval. So let's say if your file is coming on a daily basis and you want to copy that file once it is available in that blob container, then you need to trigger that on that interval only. So what you have to do is you can just create a validation activity in ADF and set up this timeout. Okay, so let's say our scenario 1. So our scenario 1 would be like execute a copy activity when the files becomes available. So let's jump on to our Azure portal and start executing it. Okay, so this is our Azure Data Factory pipeline which we have created. So here is our pipeline in which we have the copy activity where we have the source as a Azure Blob storage as well as the sink as the Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage. And we have copied one file which is like a population by age file which was in the tsv.zip format and we have got it as a tsv file which is a tab delimited file. So let's say if we have to look out for the file and once that file is become available, then only it should copy that data from source to the sink. So to do that, we can have the validate activity. So here are all the activities. So as you can see here, we have also the move and transform as well as the synapse. So in move and transform, we have the copy data, which we have discussed earlier, as well as the data flow. But here in general, we need the validation activity. So it is very simple. You just have to drag it and drop it in this panel. Okay, so we got a validation activity. So let's say we have to name this activity like check if the file is available. Okay, that makes sense. So you can also give some description what it actually does, but the name is compulsory. So in this setting, as you can see, you have to look out for some data set. So in dataset, all you have to do is select a dataset. So our dataset is population by name. So I just give a name by mistake. It should be the population by age file, which is in a Azure Blob storage. And this Gen 2 is situated on top of our Data Lake Gen 2 storage account. So as you can see, you can give the timeout here. So basically timeout here, as you can see, is it will specify the timeout of activity to run. So if no value is specified, it is considering it as a 12 hours. So let's say, so if we have like a requirement to look out for the file every day, so we will do that only. And we can also put down the sleep, which is like a delay in second between validation attempts. So if we have don't value present, then it will take it as a 10 seconds. So it is in 10 seconds. And also it is not necessary that your file is directly available fully when this execution happens. So here also you have to provide some minimum size. So it will be in the bytes. So let's say we have 1024 bytes here. So this minimum size of file in bytes. So if no value is specified, it will take it as a 0 bytes. But during the processing, it should not be available at all. So you have to make sure that you are giving a correct minimum size here. So but once you have this validation here, so if the validation is succeed, then you need to copy the data, right? So what it does is on success, you need to copy the data. So here you can just join it over here. So that is very important. So once the validation is succeeded, then only it should go to the copy data activity, which will copy the data from the data set which is situated on top of your blob container, and then it will copy the data to your Azure Data Lake storage account. So that was very simple, and also you can do all kind of stuff. So let's say if we didn't find any file and if the validation and the debugging fails, so on failure you can map it to any other activities. That also we are going to see. So it is very basic example. So in the real world it would be really complicated. So it will be like if the validation fails, it will go to some another activity, and if that succeeds then that goes to the another activity, and if it fails then it will also bifurcate according to that. So you have to make sure that you know the basics first, then you can build as many complex activities and the data pipeline flow as needed. So this was about how we can create a validation activity and check if the file is available in your blob container. Okay, so let's jump on to our scenario number 2. So what we have done is we have used the validation activity to check if the file exists in our Azure blob storage. But now we need to use like the copy activity only if the file contents are as expected. So first we will check the metadata of our file, and if it satisfies all our conditions, then only it should go to the copy activity task. And also we are going to incorporate a if condition where if the condition gets true, then only it should trigger our copy activity. So let's jump on to our ADF Studio and let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, I have just ran a debug and our validation activity and copy data activity has been succeeded. And also I have published all the changes to our ADF so that it will be up to date. So what we are going to do is we will just expand it a bit, and here what we are going to do, we need a get metadata. So the get metadata activity will get the metadata of our file, and we can then validate our results so that if the conditions are satisfied, then only it should copy the data. So we will just drag and drop the get metadata here. Okay, so as you can see, we need to configure it as required. So in the get metadata, what we are going to do is let's keep it very simple. So let's check the number of columns in our file. So we know that our file has 13 number of columns. So if the number of columns are 13, then only it should go to the copy data activity. So we will keep it as check the column count. That will be the name of our activity. So the timeout retry will be the similar as we have discussed previously. So in the settings, you have to choose the dataset here. So our dataset would be like the population by name, which is built on top of our Azure blob container. So as we have selected the dataset now, then you are going to add a field list now. So in the new, we need the column count. So, and also for your understanding, let's get another data as well, like the size of it as well as the exist. So the exist will be true because that file exists in our Azure blob storage. Okay, so once we have all this ready, let's debug this. So once we will validate the pipeline. Okay, so the validation is completed and we will start on debug. So let's say, as you can see, it is in progress now. Okay, so all our activities are completed and it is succeeded. So in the get metadata, we got the output. So let's say click on the output now, and as you can see, we got the size of the file, which is like 5986 byte, as well as exists will be true because as you already know that our file already exists in our storage. And also in the column count, it is expected that we got the column count as 13. So we got all the necessary details, and this you can ignore basically because this is the data that we really care about. So but what coming next? So if the column count will be 13, then only it should go to our copy activity. So all you have to do is once the validation is complete, like the get metadata activity, sorry, I'm saying validation is a complete another step. After validation, we need to get the metadata. So that is completed. And now we need to check for the if condition, which is situated in the iterations and conditionals. So all you can do is if the condition here and here in the if condition, this should on success will go to the if condition, right? So if the get metadata activity is completed, it should go to the if condition, and in if condition you will be having like true and false activities. So if it is true, then it will go to the next activity, and if it is false, then you can add another activity for it as well. So here the important thing is expressions. So in this case our expression would be, it will check the equality between the metadata count as well as the expected column count that we need. So as you can see in the get metadata, the column count is 13, and also we need the column count as 13. But let's say if you need a column count of 14, and if your file has 12 or 13 columns, then it should definitely fail and go to the false. So it will go to the false and trigger the activity inside the false clause. In the expression we can use the add dynamic content. This is very helpful. So in the add dynamic content, as you can see, you got all the activity outputs here, and you can have all the parameters and system variables. Then we have different functions. So in the functions, let's say we got the logical functions and we need the equals, right? So in the equals, okay, we need to check if our file has specified number of columns. So in equals, all you need to do is we need to go to the activity outputs now, right? And in the activity we got our activity which is check the column count, and here we got our activity which is like check the column count dot output, and our column name is dot column count. So what we are going to do is we are going to go into the result of our activity which is the check the column count dot output, and we need to pass the variable as well. So the variable in this case is column count, and the output of the column should be like 13 in this case. So in the true clause we have nothing here, right? We in the pipeline, if the condition satisfied, and in true we don't have anything, right? So let's go to the pipeline here. So in the copy activity, what we are going to do is we are going to right click and copy this activity and click on the if condition, and in the if condition in true we are going to paste it over here, right? So once the condition satisfied, then only it should copy the data from our blob container to our data lake gen 2 storage. Go to the pipeline now, and we don't need it over here, so we will just delete this, right? Once the validation is completed, it should go to the get metadata, and then it should go to the if condition. So our complete pipeline will first check if the file is available in our storage account, then it will go to the get metadata, and if the check the count of the column gets true, then only it will go to the if condition and copies the data from our source to the sink. So we will just validate this, and I hope the validation is completed, no errors were found, and we will just debug it. So this is in progress right now, and as you can see it got succeeded. It completed 4 type of activities. The first one was check if the file is available, so it got succeeded. So it was the validation activity. Then we checked the column count, which is like the get metadata activity, it is also succeeded. Then if condition, so if condition also got succeeded, and it copied the data from our source to sink. But what happens if the column count doesn't match whatever the value you have given? Let's do that now. Okay, so we will go to the if condition now, and instead of changing the file, let's change this condition. So in the expression, what we're going to do is instead of 13, let's put the number as 14. So if the following condition satisfied, then only it should copy the data, otherwise it should go to the false clause. So we will just click OK here, and in false we don't have nothing. So in false we have nothing here. So but let's validate it. So the validation is completed, and debug this. So it is running now, and let's see what are the results. And as you can see, it only completed 3 activities, right? So it completed the validation first, the file was available, so it got succeeded. Then it checked the column count, so the column count, so the get metadata was also succeeded, and it checked if the condition satisfied, and it also got succeeded. But it didn't copy the data, right? It didn't copy the data, but we didn't got any error as well. So in the production environment, in the real world use case, it is not expected that you don't get any warnings if certain condition fails, right? You should get notified if your certain pipeline is getting failed. So in this case, it is not tracking that. So what we are going to do is, in if condition we are also going to set some activity for the false case. So in the false case you can either get the mail activity, right, to get you the mail whenever the pipeline fails, that you can do. So it is possible using the web activity. So in the web activity what you can do is, you can just get the URL and hit the URL and just send mail whenever this pipeline will fail. So in the settings you can have like https:// pipeline has failed. So we don't have the https setup right now, so I am just giving the invalid URL in this case, just for a basic understanding. So we are going to post this message, so just put the post here, and the body will be like dummy because it is like a dummy web activity, and that's it. So once we will just go to our pipeline and let's debug this. So it will run now. So our validation and the get metadata got succeeded, and let's see if the condition gets satisfied or not. Obviously it is not going to get satisfied. Let's see the web activity and its output. I am definitely sure it is going to fail. So let's see that. So as you can see, it got failed, and let's see the error message. So in the error message what we got is error calling the endpoint, which is pipeline failed, which was like a dummy endpoint, but this was for your basic understanding only. So for now let's go into our expression and let's revert our changes. In this case we are going to click on OK and debug this again. So as you can see, all our forced activities got succeeded. So let's publish all these changes to our Azure Data Factory, so that the Azure Data Factory will be all the latest updates. So let's publish it, and it got completed. Okay, so let's jump on to the next scenario. So we need to add a delete activity after we successfully copied our file. So in the if activity we can go to the true case and delete that activity once we successfully copied our file. This is going to be very simple. So let's jump on to the ADF Studio and let's get started. Okay, so as you can see, this is our source blob container. So in the blob container we have created a directory population and we got the source file. And on top of this we have created our dataset in our Azure Data Factory. You know all this stuff. So our main goal is, once we copied this file from this blob container to our data lake storage account, we need to delete this file automatically, and it should follow our copy activity. So just jump on to our ADF Studio. So all you got is, we got the validation process, then we got the metadata, which is checking the column count, and we got the if condition. So if it gets satisfied, then it is going to copy our data. So let's go to the true now, and in true we only got the copy data activity, but we also need to add the delete activity following by this copy. So in the general tab you will see this delete activity present. So just drag and drop it after copy data, and in delete, let's say the name of it is delete the source file. Okay, so let's keep it simple only. Just add the description if you want it. So in the source, let's select the dataset now. So in the dataset, what we're going to do is select the source dataset, which is like population by name in this case. And also in the file type, you can just click on the file path in the dataset as it is. And also if you want to enable the recursively, then you can do that as well. So it processes all the files in the input folder and its subfolders recursively, or just the ones in the selected folder. So this can be disabled when a single file is selected. Okay, so let's keep other settings default only to keep it very simple. So go into the logging settings, and in enable logging you can just specify whether you want to log the deleted file names in a logging store, and also you can select the linked services as well. So like it is showing our resources list as it is, but to keep it very simple, I'll just disable this. Okay, so our delete is configured right now. So after copying the data, I'll just on succeed link to the delete activity. So this is all set now. So once we validate it, so it is validated, and let's debug this and see what happens. So to show you, our file is present in the source blob container. So once we debug this, okay, so as you can see, all our activities got succeeded. So the validation is completed, get metadata as well as the if condition and the copy condition. But in the delete activity, after it copies the data, the delete also got succeeded. So to validate it, let's jump on to this folder and let's click on refresh. And as you can see, no items were found because after copying the data to your data lake Gen 2 account, it got deleted from this Azure Blob container. This was very straightforward. So in the production environment, you will be having same scenario. So once the file is getting copied, then it will be deleted from the source and it will wait for the new files so that the entire execution then continues afterwards. This was very simple, so I'll just publish all this detail to keep our ADF with the latest changes. Okay, so now let's talk about scheduling the pipeline executions. So the triggers will allow us to schedule our pipeline executions in a very effective way. So Azure Data Factory triggers are used to schedule a pipeline which runs without any interventions. So in other words, the Data Factory triggers is like processing unit that will determine when to begin or invoke an end-to-end pipeline in Azure Data Factory. So besides the obvious benefit, which will be like scheduling the pipelines for future runs, the ADF triggers will also provide us the ability to choose and process the data from the past. So that is very beneficial. So based on the type of the trigger and the criteria that we have defined for the specific trigger, this trigger will determine when the pipeline execution will be invoked for creating a data-driven workflow. So this ADF triggers comes in 3 different types. So let's discuss them now. The first one is schedule trigger, then we have the tumbling window trigger, and also we have the event based trigger. So let's go through them one by one. The first one is a schedule trigger. So in schedule trigger, this is a very popular trigger that run the data pipeline according to the predetermined schedule. So it will provide a extra flexibility by allowing different scheduling intervals like minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months as well. So you can set the start and the end dates for the schedule trigger to be active so that it only runs based on the given time period. And furthermore, we can also use the schedule trigger for running the future calendar days and the times, such as like the 30th of each month as well as the first and third Monday of each month and many more such things. So the schedule triggers are built with a many to many relationship in mind. So which implies that the one schedule trigger can run several data pipelines and a single data pipeline can run by multiple schedule triggers. So that is all about the schedule trigger. Now let's talk about the tumbling window trigger. So the tumbling window trigger will execute the pipeline at specific time slice, or we can say it as a predetermined periodic time interval. So it is significantly more advantageous than the schedule trigger when working with the historical data for copying or migrating that data. So consider the scenario in which you need to replicate data from a database into the data lake on a regular basis, and you want to keep it in a separate files or folders for every hour or so. So for implementing this type of use case, you will be having to set a tumbling window trigger for every 1 hour or every 24 hours according to your needs. And the tumbling window trigger will send the start and end times for each time window to that dataset. And it will also return all the data between those periods. And finally, the data for each hour or the day, whatever you have set, can be saved in own file or folders. So that was about tumbling window trigger. Then at the last, we have the event based trigger. So in the event based trigger, it will run the pipelines in response to the blob related events. So such as like generating or deleting a blob file present in already in the blob storage. So with the event based triggers, we can schedule the data pipelines to execute in response to an event which occurred in your blob storage. And also in addition to that, event based triggers are not only compatible with blob but also available with Azure Data Lakes. So similar to the schedule triggers, event can also work on many to many relationships. So in which like a single event trigger can run several pipelines, as well as the single pipeline can run by multiple event triggers. So those were all about the theoretical stuffs. Now let's jump onto the Azure portal and create a trigger so that you will get a clear understanding of this activity. Okay, so we will get started with creating our triggers. So to create your triggers, all you have to go into the manage option now, and in manage we got our link services. But instead of link services, we have to create a trigger. So we need to click on the trigger now, and as you can see, we can add a new trigger. By default, the type of our trigger will be scheduled, but we also have the tumbling window, as well as then we have the storage events and the custom events. But let's talk about the schedule trigger first. So in the schedule trigger, as we have already discussed, that it should have a specific start date. So in the start date, you can have any start date and the time of your trigger. And also you have the different time zones as well. So here the default one will be the UTC, which is like a universal time, but also in my case that will be IST time, which is a plus 5 hours 30 minutes more than the UTC time. So I'll just select that, and here in the schedule type we got to specify your recurrences. So you need to specify how much time this trigger should execute. So it will be like every 15 minutes, or you can say like the hours, days, weeks, or month. So what we are going to do is we will be selecting every 24 hours here. And also you can specify the end date of your trigger. So if you don't have it, you can just select it. So this was all about the schedule trigger. So instead of schedule, let's click on the tumbling window. So in the tumbling window, as you can see, you got like the similar kind of approach. You got the start date, it will be default in the UTC now. So you don't have another option in here in the UTC. So you have to make sure that you are putting the correct time here. And also you can select the intervals as well, but this is like an advance of the schedule trigger, because you got the advance option as well, and you can add the dependency. So this trigger can be dependent on some other trigger and so on. And also you can specify the delay, the concurrency, and all other stuff in the tumbling window trigger. And also we got the storage event trigger. So this is like a replacement of the event based trigger. So in the storage events, you have to select your subscription. So you can just click on the from Azure subscription, and you need to select your subscription. So I got a free trial subscription here, as well as you have to select your storage account name. So we got the two storage accounts, like the one for the data lake and one for the blob container storage. So I'll just select that, and also you got to give the container name here as well as the blob path. So this must be a specific path to your blob. And also you can just click on to the blob created or blob deleted as the events, and also you can ignore the empty blobs. So if this is selected, the blobs with 0 files will be ignored and will not generate a pipeline run. So this is like all about different types of the triggers. So let's create a trigger for our use case now. Okay, so for our use case, the best type of the trigger will be the storage event type, because once the file arrives in our blob storage, we need to execute our trigger. So this event will be the best suitable for our use case. So in the name we can say that execute copy activity. So this will execute our ADF pipeline, and the type of it will be storage events. We got the free tier subscription here, as well as the storage account name, and in the container name you can have that population container here, and also the blob path begins with. So as you already know that our file name is the population underscore by age.tsv.gz, which is like a zip tsv file that is like our source file that we put on our blob container. So this trigger will look out for this pipe, and once this blob is created only, so we'll just only keep it as created. So once the event is blob created, then only it will trigger our pipeline. So we can also keep it the yes as to ignore the empty blobs, because we don't want empty blobs here. Our file should have the data. And also we can select this as start trigger on creation, and if everything looks good, we need to click on continue. So here you can ignore this warning. This warning is like make sure you have the specific filters. So since we only have exact file name given here, we can click on OK. So we got an error. We got an error saying like register the Azure Grid event grid resource provider to your subscription before creating an event trigger. So to solve this error, let's go to the Azure portal and let's go into your home, and in home you got all your subscriptions. So click on subscriptions, you got the free trial, go to the free trial. Okay, so in here you're gonna go into the resource provider. So in the resource provider you will be having all the resource providers here listed. So you have to search for event. So in the event grid, which is not the registered one, so you just need to click on it and click on register now. So it will take some 2 to 3 minutes to complete. So let's keep it running and then we can continue our trigger creation. Okay, so it got succeeded. So we can go to our ADF and create our trigger. So we'll just click on continue and click on OK now. And as you can see, our executor has been started. But as you can see, we don't have this trigger tied to our ADF pipeline. So we just need to go to our pipeline. So go into the author now, and in the pipeline we need to click on add trigger. So in the add trigger, okay, so this will be like new edit. So just drop down we got the execute copy activity trigger, and we'll keep it the name as it is, then all the details we already provided, and click on continue. So as you can see, we got the continue here, and we will click on OK. So after this we can just publish our details and we'll just publish it. Okay, so this is successfully deployed. So all you have to do is just go into your storage account. So let's go into our all the resources, and in resources we got our blob storage. So in the blob storage we'll go to the storage browser, then we got the blob container, and in blob container is the population items, and we don't have anything. So in here let's keep our file and wait for our trigger to get executed. So we'll just upload our files here from the file system. So just browse for files, and in files we got our file as population by age.tsv.gz file. So this is the file it was expecting. Okay, so our file has been successfully uploaded. So just close this and go to your ADF pipeline, and in the monitor 1 let's see the triggers, and as you can see we got the pipeline runs here. So it is in progress right now. So as you can see, this is in progress right now, which is like executing the copy activity. So this was the manual trigger, so you can ignore this now. So in the execute copy activity, let's wait for it to complete. Okay, so as you can see, it is succeeded. So we can just click on view pipeline run, and as you can see all our things are completed. So it got validated the data, then it got the metadata and the if condition to check the number of columns present in our file. So it copied the file and deleted the file. So once we got into this, and this was our uploaded file, but if we click on refresh, as you can see we don't have anything because our file got deleted after the copy activity. Here in the pipeline runs, you can just click on the status and you can just select the succeeded or the failed or the queued or in progress according to your requirement, and you can also get last 24 hours of the execution, as well as you can filter it according to the names, and as well as the latest runs, and so many things you can do. So if you have like more and more pipelines getting deployed in Azure, then you can go to this monitor tab and just effectively monitor your pipeline runs. You can also go into the dashboard to get the full view. So as you can see, we got the 2 succeeded runs here, as well as we got all the activities. So we got 10 activities which got all succeeded, as well as the trigger. So we got only one trigger and that got succeeded. So this monitor tab is very informative. You can also go into the triggered runs, and as you can see, this execute copy activity trigger was run successfully after we put our file into the source. And also we have the integration runtime. So we have the existing single integration runtime, but eventually we'll be having more. So you can track this under here, and also you can have the data flow debug. So since we don't have any of the records available, and also you can set up like the alerts and metrics. So you can create a new rule alert that we are going to see in the upcoming lectures how we can do that to effectively monitor your Azure Data Factory. So this was all about today's lecture. Here we have learned a lot about how to automate your Azure Data Factory using the triggers, as well as we have seen different activities to make your Azure Data Factory pipeline production ready. Okay, so the next lecture will going to get released on the 3rd of July. So in the 4th lecture, we are going to talk about data integration with different Azure services, where we'll integrate different services with our Azure Data Factory. So we are going to connect our Azure SQL database, as well as utilize the Azure Databricks for our data integration, as well as we will integrate Synapse Analytics with our Azure Data Factory, and also leverage the Azure machine learning in Data Factory pipelines. So this is going to be really interesting. So I'll see you in the next lecture.